call the theory of integral Judaism, or an integral approach to anything, is to try to piece together the disparate parts to begin to discern the totality and of what it is that you're examining or studying or embodying. And part of my theory is the idea that the word Yud He Vav He, however you pronounce it, is a code word that represents the totality of everything, of the universe, really. Now, some people call it God, and for many good reasons. Some call it Havaya, existence. But we know that whatever you call it, it's inherently a Jewish word, and there are many Jewish concepts associated with it. But throughout history, and in my understanding, and I believe that of many others, it represents the totality of everything in the universe, seen and unseen. So that's the theory. The practice can be summed up in this phrase in Hebrew: Shiviti Adonai, or Shiviti Yah Lenegdi Tamid. Yah is another name for God. It's the first syllable of what you might say is Yahweh, or Yahweh, Yahweh, Yehovah. But keeping in one's mind's eye the awareness of the totality of everything. And so you can do that wherever you are, in whatever you're doing. And that's the practice. Being aware that there's something beyond always, something that includes, that transcends and includes everything, including us. We are a part of that, and that wholeness is a part of us. That's that spark within us. So you can choose to live an Orthodox life, or you can choose to live a secular life, or engage in any practices which I might regard as archaic or arcane. But I think the goal of one's life might be summed up as in the word self-realization. By engaging in this practice of keeping the totality of everything in the forefront of one's mind, or at least in the background of one's thinking and one's consciousness, the self-realization becomes possible. Another word for that might be self-actualization. And what do those mean? In a very general way, you could say it means the fulfillment of one's own potential. But that begs the question, what is one's own potential? What is the fullest potential, not only of yourself as an individual, given your own personality and background and training and so forth, but maybe what's the fullness of human potential? And I happen to believe that that's within the realm of what is possible for each one of us. It's possible for each one of us to achieve that. And self-actualization could be seen as the highest on this hierarchy of needs, as illustrated by Abraham Maslow, although, as we had spoken before, this hierarchical structure may not be so helpful to some people. We might just see it as perhaps in concentric circles, as an expanding of one's consciousness. But the goal is to become wiser and more compassionate people. Here are a few definitions. Self-actualized people are accepting of others as well as their own flaws, often with humor and tolerance. Not only do self-actualized people fully accept others, they are also true to themselves rather than pretending in order to impress others. I'll read this next one and then we'll have a little discussion about this. Maslow argued that self-actualized people are firmly grounded in the real world, rather than the miasma of stereotypes, abstractions, expectations, and biases that most of us experience. So I'd like to have just a little discussion about what we've discussed so far. What is self-actualization, self-realization, and is it possible? Is it even something that's desirable? Any comments, questions?
Seems to me that self-actualization is closely tied
I'm not
to...
hearing anything, Chip. It looks like you're speaking.
Can others hear me?
Okay, now we can.
It seems to me that self-actualization is closely tied
Can you
to
turn up the volume on your microphone though? It's
Sounds fine on this end. How about you?
Oh yeah, it's okay. Maybe it's just I'm sorry, it's mine. Go ahead.
It seems to me that self-actualization is closely aligned with self-confidence, because I often think that people who are causing trouble in the world, evil, we might even say, are because they lack self-confidence, and they have to continually try and prove themselves and be more powerful than others, be better than others. So if you've achieved self-actualization, you've achieved some degree, or you have some degree of self-confidence. I'm not a psychologist, but that's my psychological take on it.
Okay, I'm a psychotherapist. So I would say that it's a process. And yes, Maslow was male, so he made it a hierarchical. It could also be vaginic or round. But we often made jokes about that in school. And the thing about it is getting one's needs fulfilled. So you need basic needs like water and food and love. Well, actually, love was another level, but I don't necessarily agree with all of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, because I've learned, and maybe since his time, I don't know, that babies can actually die if they aren't touching the mother when they're born. There's something about that touch. Anyway, so Maslow's hierarchy of needs is about getting one's needs met of love and so forth. And then ultimately you achieve, like nirvana, which is not his term, but similar, self-actualization.
I think the point he was making, and I'll share this picture again, was that it's very important. The first stage of one's needs is the physiological needs. And once those are satisfied, then the other levels can be satisfied progressively. So, even your esteem needs, which might have to do with self-confidence, once those have been established and met, and then self-actualization becomes possible. Is that clear?
Mm-hmm.
Comments, questions about this whole thing?
I think I heard Linda say at the beginning that it's a process, which I totally think. I mean, I think we all have different levels of self-actualization or moments of, being in our truest self and our fullest potential. I think that that's definitely a cycle, right? And for me, I don't think, like when I think about a goal to life, or, quote unquote, whatever that means, it's not about transcending this human life to another plane, or like transcendence, or like nirvana or samadhi or some other place, but really being fully 100% present in each moment in this plane.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, I think there is a connection between those two. And, some go one direction, some go the other, but I think there is possible for one to integrate really a fuller understanding of what is and having the ability to embody that.
Hence the term integral, right? It's like all of it, right?
Absolutely. And when I think about a goal, I think about not as some achievement, some static place where one finally arrives, but more like the goal of living. Perhaps maybe purpose might be a better term. To be always growing, evolving, learning, becoming more fully self-actualized. If a complete end to that process is ever possible, which I don't think it is. Any other thoughts, questions about this being one's own, does anyone see one's own life as being on that trajectory, shall we say? So here's how this all fits together. I believe that Judaism is inherently a spiritual path that's founded on the idea that everything is connected. And that there is a totality, and we've given a name to it. But what has happened throughout history, and that name is that name, the four-lettered name. But throughout our history, people have ascribed to that totality different attributes, mostly anthropomorphic attributes, human-like, and imagined that totality to have human-like forms and traits and even emotions, that God could be vengeful, or God could be, forgiving. So all of these have, qualities, attributes have accrued over the years, and just layers upon layers. And it gets very complicated. And, my goal in this course was to try to remove some of those layers, if not all of those layers, to rediscover what is at the core. You remember the experience I described to you of my imagining myself to be like an onion, and with all the different layers, I could peel them away one by one to get to what was really at the core of it. And I found that core to be something that had no qualities whatsoever. It was a very frightening experience to just become one with the universe, but it was there. And it's remained in my consciousness. It had an indelible mark on my consciousness to know that totality is there, and that I'm part of it. And it is part of me, and we're all connected in some unknowable way. And so I was hoping to really get to the core of what that name represents, that Yud He Vav He.
If I may say, Moshe,
Yeah.
It's both. We're all separate. Everything is separate, and we're one. And the separateness is so confusing that it makes us forget the one, because we're so separate. It's an important point, so I had to mention it. Sorry if I interrupted.
Well, that's a very wise statement. And we forget. And I think our lives is, I think part of the purpose, at least as I see it, is to try, in the course of our lives, to remember. And this practice that I had recommended is in a way a form of remembering. There's a reminder there. And, it's in another tradition than Sufism. It's called Zikr, which is related to the Hebrew word zecher, remembrance.
If I could comment also, I love the association of connectiveness with Judaism that you mentioned. And I think we are seeing that play out just even increasingly with our societal challenges, our world challenges. Climate change, just as an example, where people want to isolate it as a particular problem, yet it's so connected to so many other things. I wanted to go back, though. I don't really intend to put us in reverse, but I wanted to go back to this notion of self-actualization, because if we are all continually striving for self-actualization, how does that jive with the religious aspect of Judaism that believes there's some all-powerful being that in some way is controlling our lives, or, you know, writing the story of our lives, or that we need to answer to? That's where I come up against, you know, a friction that I can't resolve.
It's causes great confusion. I'll try to explain it as I see it for what that's worth, but maybe it will bring some clarity to you. One thing we've inherited from our tradition is the notion that Yud He Vav He is a personification of the divine energy, and that there's a God, a deity with which we are in relationship. And that deity has spoken to Moses and given Moses the law. Moses gave it to us, and all we need to do is follow it. And that prayer and liturgy is all to remind us that we are in relationship with this deity, and we must, you know, ask for forgiveness and pray for well-being and pray for the well-being of the world and all of these things. But it's a form of divine service, serving God. That's the idea. And that we are somehow commanded to do that. And we're obligated as Jews according to the Orthodox way of thinking. But you see how that's built on so many layers. And it's a shame that it's become something that's so different from pursuing self-actualization. But I'm proposing here that the goal of Jewish practice is to be engaged in that process of self-actualization, self-realization. And I consider myself to be a seeker of truth. And, you know, you'd like to think that a rabbi is a seeker of truth. But I think more people think of a rabbi as an authority on law and you know, as someone to lead services and so forth. I see a question in the chat from Listen, and then Laura, I see you had a question too, but let's address this question in the chat. How does the Torah fit into this vision? Good question. The Torah is a sacred text, and many traditions have their sacred texts. And we understand it to be given to Moses, given to us from Moses, and Moses received it on Sinai directly from God, from this Yud He, this mysterious Yud He Vav He. And so, you know, when human beings have a divine encounter, it is so mind-blowing, so outside of the realm of anything we've ever experienced. And yet it's almost like there's a sense of great love and connection and some communication that's taking place. And many understand that to be someone speaking to them. I think that's a concept that we inherited, that this divine energy spoke to Abraham, spoke to Isaac and Jacob, and spoke to Moses and the prophets. So we have this concept of a deity with whom we are in relationship. And that's just a notion that we've inherited. And, you know, we can go along with that. And it works for a lot of people, but it doesn't work for some. And so if I were to go back upstream and say that this divine energy, this connection that we have with the universe, you see, I learned from the Kabbalists that it doesn't always have to be personified. There is something in our tradition called the Ein Sof, which is like beyond God. Does that help answer your question? Listen.
Yeah, I think it's like the kind of discussion that you can have forever.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
But I'd like to say that they're connected. I think the Zohar tries to interpret the Torah from a Kabbalistic perspective. Okay, Laura, what was on your mind?
Well, I was just reacting both to Listen's statement and Chip's. And to me, the thing that we, during having this self-actualization discussion or intention, have friction with is similar to the Torah. If we try to hang on to it, to me, it's an ancient document. It's like our ancestors wrote their stories 3,000 years ago. And that is incredibly cool. And that's what the Torah is. It's that our ancestors trying to make sense of the world, trying to record things that happened, trying to record things they didn't understand, wrote this scroll. And it's ancient. And trying to force it to be, as it was written, relevant in today's life, and trying to have a 3,000-year-old concept of God dictate how we interpret God today, well, for me, that chafes, but I don't try to do that. I love it. I mean, I read it, I study it, but I study it as this incredible thing from our past. I mean, how many people have a book from their ancestors 3,000 years ago? That's really cool. And I love reading it. And I love that people play what I consider games with it to say, how do we make this relevant today? I appreciate that they're choosing the stuff that we like, and it's like, and they're ignoring things like it's an abomination for a man to lay with a man as he would with a woman. But all of it is just ancient. They said slavery was okay back then, but you ought to be nice to your slaves. It's ancient, that's all. Don't try to make it make sense as it was written in your life today.
Yeah, great wisdom you've shared.
That's an excellent point, Laura, but history is interesting because it affects the present.
It's true. It's a record of
only
our
affects-
search as a people. I want to say that I think one thing about Judaism is that the idea of self-actualization for us as individuals is actually pretty foreign. Because in Judaism, self-actualization was really conceived of as a communal process. And that the goal, they described the goal as geula, which means redemption. And they conceived of it as, that God would save us and the Messiah would come and the world would be at peace again. And we would go back to Jerusalem and conduct animal sacrifices. But these are ancient ways of conceiving of this process. And I admire the fact that we think in communal terms like that. But I think that if we work on ourselves, that has an impact on the community. I think there's an interplay between them. Where I'm going with this is to say that this is why I liked the practice of Mussar. Because it's much clearer in Mussar that the goal is to work on ourselves and to become mensches. And what does it mean to be a mensch? A human being? To be a good person, a decent person, and what I'd like to think of, is to be a self-actualized person. And so that's why I intend to come back to Mussar, but I thought it was important that we establish that I really had to think through, well, what does it mean to be a mensch? And I think it has to incorporate this other dimension, what I would call a spiritual dimension. But I think we get stuck on, well, you know, if it involves this deity that I don't believe in, that's just a problem. But I think if we go upstream, if we go back before all of these stories, before all this mythology developed, I think we can really understand the essence of our tradition. And that is the connection, the connectivity, the totality of everything that we express in the affirmation that we recite, the Shema. Hear, O Israel, are you listening? This Yud He Vav He is what we call God. We conceive of it as God. This Yud He Vav He is one. If we understand and interpret the Shema in that way, I think we might be able to begin to see how it frees us up to have a completely different understanding of Jewish practice, of Torah, and of our own lives. Any other comments, observations, especially from someone who hasn't spoken yet? Another question I'll ask is, how did it go? Did anyone practice try out the practice? And how did that go?
I know I spoke before, but I'll speak again. I have done meditation on and off for years. And I know Om and other versions of that where you can focus on individual objects and so forth. But I love Lissen's idea of shalom. And I've incorporated that in my practice, and I'm doing shalom. And there's two things about it that I like a lot. That it's Jewish and that it means peace. And I would like to create that in my life more, if possible. And the idea of it being in my being in the moment and putting that out into the world and feeling that inner connection is very fulfilling.
That's beautiful. Wow, what a great practice. Laura, I think it might have been Laura, right? Who came up with that mantra, shalom, right? Was it? No? Oh, okay. Listen says it wasn't her. Maybe
It was Listen.
It wasn't me, but it was in my group.
Oh.
Someone was talking about it, and was it you, Michelle?
No, it was Sandy.
Oh,
She,
okay, I said corrected.
well, she was one of the people anyway. She brought it up to our small Havruta group a few weeks ago, and we've been practicing. Maybe she'd say something about it.
That's a great idea. Now, Laura asked the question, is it possible to know that you're self-actualized? You know, that's a good question. We kind of discussed that today in study group, you know, when, you know, with the Tao Te Ching, how do you know if you know, you don't know. You know, it would be good to ask a few people who we might consider to be self-actualized. I saw a list of self-actualized people that includes Albert Einstein, or the Dalai Lama, or William James, or Martin Luther King, or Gandhi, people like that. You know, if you ask them, are you self-actualized? They probably say no. They probably say, I'm still working on myself. But that's a good question, I think. I don't know. I think a self-actualized person would probably not say, I'm self-actualized.
A narcissist might think that they're self-actualized.
Who?
A narcissist.
Right. Right. As Lao Tzu said in the Tao Te Ching, he who knows does not say, and he who says does not know. So, anyone else want to share what their experience was with the meditation practice?
I didn't listen to the recording of last week until I guess Sunday. But I've done it several times since then. I mean, I've meditated with other phrases. I mean, I've done Om, the Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. I in a Jewish meditation once with CJC, we were taught to say the Shema, like breathing in and out, like Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Shema Yisrael, like that repeatedly. So I've done that one before. So I'm like, okay, I'll try this Yud Hey Vav Hey. Definitely a lot of monkey brain. I have a timer that helps that's on my iPad that just, I can put it in, say, give me a little ding every few minutes, and then let me know that I'm done after whatever the larger amount of time is. And that helps because then I'm not wondering how long it's been. It's a tough one. I was using visualization of the letters. Like I just was saying them in my head, but then also visualizing Yud Hey, Yud Hey, Vav Hey, trying to see if that would help keep me focused. It helped a little bit. Yeah, definitely a lot of monkey brain.
Yes, Gordon.
Yep. I took the Yud Hey Vav Yud Hey and combined it with the breathing exercise, where I started with the pacing that you had suggested, 2 letters on the inhale, 2 letters on the exhale. Then I would go to 1 letter inhale, 1 exhale. Then I went only with the exhale, a letter at a time with the exhale. And then I added a pause, kept slowing down my breathing with a pause after each exhale. And then I added a breath, it created space between each letter where I had, Yud, it was one, exhale would be 1 breath, a pause, another breath of silence, then then moving through the letters with a space of breath between them. And by that point, my mind, I was in a meditative state. I was just, it was wonderful. I used it to help fall asleep at night, woke up in the middle of the night, and my brain's running during the day. It just, it's so hard just to stop and start breathing, start meditating. This became a very powerful tool. And, at some point, as you mentioned, kind of feel a bit like an out-of-body experience in a way. You're up above it. So it's really great. So thank you so much.
Wow, that is fantastic to hear. I'm glad to know when it's working. And I want to say that, any variation is fine. And, it doesn't have to be any set way. But just practicing, I think meditation is so much value. And associating it in some way with our tradition, I think it helps us stay rooted, and there's something of deep, profound value in our tradition that I think is to be, that's there for us to reap. Yes, listen.
It just made me think, just really, really quickly, my best friend of many years just 2 weeks ago left to spend time at Upaya Zen Retreat Center in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And I was talking to her for the first time today. And she was talking about the chants and the practices that they do. And she said that all of a sudden it hit her the other day, while I'm doing all these chants and these phrases, why not be doing, I should be doing something Jewish, and that just as her natural process in that place. So we were talking about this practice.
So cool. Yeah. I think I felt that way when I came out of the ashram many years ago. So as we start to wrap up this whole series, it's been an important time for me to reflect and to really try to see where I wanted to go with this. And I know that somehow this theory and this practice can be connected to Mussar. And I think they're really very much in sync. And, you know, Torah study and prayer, you know, that's all great. But I think if we really want to take a direct path, I think it has something to do with self-realization or self-actualization. And has something to do with changing our mind, our awareness. And I think as we become aware of a greater presence, divine presence, call it, if you will, or just an expansive presence, somehow that engenders in us a sense of reverence, a sense of compassion, patience, kindness, all these qualities that cause us to become better people. I think that's ultimately the goal. And it's not an endpoint, it's a process. It's a purpose. And so I'm hoping, my vision is that the COSI community kind of gets it, kind of understands that at least that's where I'm at. And maybe some members of the community might be willing to work with those ideas and embody them and practice them and support one another in that practice. And I think that if we were to do that, our community would come to reflect that's where we are and where we're going, and that it would naturally be reflected in the quality of our relationships and how we are in the world and what we value. So I think that's an ambitious goal, but I think it's important that we have these kinds of conversations and that I try to articulate as best I can what I'm thinking and where I'm going. And if folks like the ideas and want to go in that same direction, wow, how awesome that would be, at least as far as I'm concerned. So any more thoughts? I'd love to hear what Maria's thinking up there in Canada. Sandy, Colorado. What's going on, Maria?
No, I have many reflections after that. I unfortunately had to miss last week, but I can really relate to many things that have been said today. Like with meditation itself, I'm pretty allergic to meditation because I never felt it made me feel better, only worse. But at some point, actually, as Laura said, I took Shema, and for some reason that became like a meditation for me. Because I don't consider it as praying per se, because I don't know how spiritual I am if I'm at that level that I can say, oh, I pray, right? And that the standard understanding of the word. And at the same time, it also doesn't occur to me as meditation. So it allows me to sort of focus and at the same time, don't go those like dark paths that like classical meditation usually takes me. So that's something I figured out some time ago. And I think that is when I started to reconnect with Judaism, and it showed me in the end how how this might be the way, like the path to self-actualization. I'm nowhere, near the goal, and I don't think I will ever be. But I think at some point I figure out that might be a feasible path, like for me personally. And definitely connecting with CJC, and like first with Mussar group, and now with this, like really sort of grounded me in this idea that was a good idea, I think. And yeah, and by the way, really, like, thank you for making me feel so welcome, because I've never met any of you in person, but somehow I feel like I belong, and I think that's really wonderful.
Well, I'm really glad, Maria, to hear that you're interested in learning more and strengthening your Jewish identity, and that you've asked me to continue a conversation with you about that. So I look forward to that.
Yeah, me too. Thank you.
Anyone else? Sandy, Jerry, Jackie, if you're there.
Okay, my turn. I'm a Shema. I found that on Jewish meditation on YouTube, Shalom. It's a mantra. And I find doing the mantra keeps my brain more centered and it'll run off. If I do the Yud Hey Vav Hey, I've been doing that for years. And I do that. I was driving the other day in a 2-hour drive through construction. So in my mind, I was doing Yud Hey Vav Hey, and it calmed me down. And it got me to where I was going without panicking and everything else. So I use it more for that at this point. And then when I go to sleep at night, I use Yud Hey Vav Hey all the time. And again, it helps me fall asleep because it's calming. So,
Great.
I enjoyed this. Yeah, I started from Kabbalah way back when. And this has been great to kind of to go over some of that from back then. So thank you.
Fantastic. I was just reading it's a great book, Cleansing the Doors of Perception by Houston Smith, a great scholar of religion. And it's based on the concept of that Aldous Huxley, he wrote a book on doors of perception. So anyway, he talks about how in Indian philosophy, deep sleep is actually considered to be a higher state of awareness, which I wouldn't have thought of, because I think, I'm not aware at all, but actually quite to the contrary. So it's interesting that reciting, these mantras can help you fall asleep and enter that very deep state of awareness. One or two more comments, Jerry, Jackie, anybody?
Well, this is Jerry. The only thing that I can comment on is, prayer is a part of my daily life. Now, I don't pray like I think most people are taught to pray. I don't have definite prayers, but what I do is for lack of a better word, I send out energy to people who are in some sort of need, or, be that health or needing more joy in their life, so I try to think of them and send out that energy. But I love the idea of the Shema, because I'm doing the talk and I'm sending it out. I think it's time for me to listen and to be more aware. And yet I know that I get prayers said for me because I can feel them. I know that when times are whatever, when I'm elated or when I'm sad, and if I share that with people that I feel are prayerful, I feel that energy from them that helps me to rise above or to mellow out to a place of balance. And I love the idea of using it using the meditation with Mussar. I love Mussar. Jackie and I I think this is our week to do honor, but we're meeting every 2 weeks, and Deborah will be back with us when she stops having all the company she's having. But I thank you for bringing that meditation into the Mussar because it just deepens it and makes it, you know, I find those, you know, deeper inside of me when I am being quiet and trying to focus on the word. It's, you know, I've read all what it means, but when I really want to know it. So I guess it's a form of meditation, but I'm going to try to do it more mindfully. So thanks for asking me.
Well, I love everything I'm hearing. And I want to check in with the Mussar groups and reconnect and get a little momentum going there again. And I want to mention that if there's anyone here who's not in a Mussar group but is interested, let me know, because I'm going to be connecting more groups, and we're going to be picking that up again very soon. I think one thing I wanted to, oh, Jackie, you're there. I want to see if you want to share anything.
I'm sort of all taking it all in, and it feels right and connected, but I'm having, it's a little overwhelming to me. All, you know, thinking about the totality of everything and the interconnectivity of everything. So,
Okay.
not a bad place. I'm just having a hard time processing it and integrating it.
Great. Well, maybe we can have a conversation later offline.
Sure.
Like that. So one thing I'd like to do before we conclude our session tonight is I'd like for us to meditate together. I think it is powerful to meditate with others, and even over Zoom, it seems to work. It seems to have very much the same effect. So we'll meditate for 10 minutes. I'll set a timer. I'll go on mute. I would ask you to mute yourselves as well. And I'd like you to give some thought to, you know, what mantra you're going to use, or how you're going to meditate or focus on the breath, and what, if it feels any different, meditating together in this way. But I think our intentionality, let me just set the intention here. May this gathering open our minds and our hearts to new possibilities, to really gain a better sense of our potential and how we might actualize that more and more each day. May this meditation give us the time to take in on a deeper level what we've heard, and allow us to integrate it into our understanding and into our lives. So I'll go ahead and we'll begin for 10 minutes, and then I'll come back. When we're done, I'll just say a few words to bring us back together. that will gently bring us back to an awareness of being together, and being connected in ways that are seen and unseen. I want to say in closing that I think it's wonderful that you've taken your practices in different directions, and I encourage that. But I also want you to know that my practice is a meditation on the name, on this four-letter name. And for me, it's like a window into the unknown, like a portal into another dimension. And by allowing my soul to go there and to enter into the unknown, it also opens a channel for that divine energy to flow back